The Pokemon market is in a very different phase for 2026, especially with all the journey that we had in 2025. One of the most tumultuous years just passed, and of course, now everyone, including myself, is expecting what is going on with this year. There are so many things happening, whether it's Pokemon Lego that's just been announced and released. There's going to be a big lineup for Pokemon Lego throughout this whole year. We've also got what's going to be happening with the TCG. Will Pokemon Lego disperse a little bit of the collectible audience? I think something interesting about this year in particular is all the new TCGs that are going to be really going full throttle to compete with Pokemon. We do know Yu-Gi-Oh is releasing overframe cards. A lot of people are hyped about that because it's the first time that Yu-Gi-Oh is actually introducing some sort of full art cards in their main TCG. Though, what does that actually mean for the market and collectible world for the trading cards? Because alternate art cards and Sword and Shield cards in particular are definitely having a weird journey and they aren't able to hold their high prices. And this is a big lesson for everyone who's watching now. And if you're new to the collectible world, it's very important that you learn the information that's kind of going to be presented in this video, because Sword and Shield was a very much loved era of Pokemon, though when the TCG was around, especially for Sword and Shield, everyone said, don't worry about Sword and Shield. It is never going to compete with any of the older sets. Right now, that's not the case at all. Though, what is interesting is that some of the highs of Sword and Shield cards haven't been able to hold like a lot of people expected. Check this out. First one we're talking about is Crown Zenith, arguably one of the greatest Pokemon sets ever released. It is actually one of my favorite sets of all time. I did make a video talking about the 10 greatest Pokemon sets of all time, and Crown Zenith does make it in the top 3. To me, this is it's absolutely incredible. Whether you're talking about the Galarian Galleries, you have such incredible pull rates. If you open Crown Zenith, you're going to be having a blast with the set. But let's check out the Crown Zenith Elite Trainer box just in the last 3 months, and then what happened during the November period, even into December. Pokemon cards started coming down in price, and you can see Crown Zenith was selling for 197 US, though it has made a pretty decent recovery back to 224. I'm going to pull this into the year graph so you can really get a good overview of Crown Zenith. Right there, we can see that Crown Zenith was selling for $101 in January of last year. A year ago, you could have picked this up for $100, which is super cheap, man. Like that, in terms of what you're getting for this set, in terms of how high quality it is, that's a good price for an ETB. Right now, new ETBs are pretty much always like 90, 95. And it's kind of crazy how quick the market shifted, right? Though when we pull that up, you can see Crown Zenith just shot up all the way to $226. And that was the point where people and collectors said, hey, this is probably what we're most comfortable paying for this set. I remember I made my channel when Paldean Fates came out, and the big talk about Crown Zenith was a year old at that point, and it was still so cheap as an ETB, which is weird to think about, because if we look right now, a year ago Prismatic Evolutions came out, and that ETB is not cheap whatsoever. Though back in 2024, when Crown Zenith was just 1 year old, it was such a cheap Elite Trainer box. And it's crazy to me to think about now, because it's like, wow, everyone knew Crown Zenith was so high quality, so we can see that the market is having a little bit of a shake up there. Now, moving on to the chase card of Crown Zenith, which is the Giratina VSTAR, was selling for $224, and right now it's dropped down to $191, which is interesting because Crown Zenith's out of print. You cannot get this set anymore unless you are buying it from the secondary market, and it is very interesting to see that the top chase card is actually coming down in price. I'm going to pull this into the year graph, and right there, interesting journey, right? Because last year was selling for $214 at this time, so this is a big thing, and if you are new to collectibles, you will see singles are just so volatile, and you can see that here because $214 last year, right now selling for $192. So if you did buy Giratina VSTAR, whether you bought it, it's actually a smarter decision to buy it now than it was last year. You just know, no one knows where things can go. Especially when I talk about some of the alternate arts later in this video and some of the Sword and Shield era cards, you will see that they just have had weird moments where they haven't been able to hold their high prices. And to me, I do think that Sword and Shield era will bounce back with a vengeance, given the fact that it introduced so many people back to Pokemon because of the Nintendo Switch. If you track Pokemon game sales, you actually can get a very good overview of just how powerful the Sword and Shield era was because it sold so many copies. Now, moving on to Giratina from V-Star Universe. Here, this is interesting. This is the Japanese Giratina V-Star, right now selling for $148. So when we look just before at that pricing, which was $192, this is very similar price points for an English chase card and a Japanese chase card. That is actually very rare. Usually the English chase card, especially for these mainline sets, is far more expensive. That is so common that, like, when we look at something like the Umbreon from Prismatic Evolutions versus the Umbreon from Terrestrial Festival, they are massive, massive price differences. It's huge. It's almost, they're not on the same playing field. The fact that these are actually in a similar price bracket or somewhat close is very, very interesting. Also, while we're talking about these Japanese cards, it's actually a good time to speak about today's video sponsor, Bai. Now, if you've ever tried buying Japanese products online, you've probably run into that annoying issue where sellers won't ship outside Japan. And that's exactly what Bai solves. Bai is a Japanese proxy shopping service that lets you buy almost anything from Japan, and it allows you to have it shipped straight to your door. Bai acts as your go-between service so you can access Japanese products worldwide. Using Bai is super simple. You can just search for what you're after and it will show you what's available. For example, here I'm searching for Pokemon cards and Bai shows you what you can purchase. Now, once you place an order, Bai ships everything to their warehouse, prepares it for international delivery and sends it out to regions like North America, Oceania, and Europe. So if you're hunting for Japanese exclusive items, definitely check out Bai. And as a bonus, viewers of this channel get an exclusive 10% off their first purchase. The link and discount code are in the video's description. A big thanks to Bai for supporting the channel. Now let's jump back into the video. Now, moving on to the Giratina V alternate art from Lost Origin. I'm gonna pull this into the year graph so we can get a good overview, but when you're looking at that year snapshot, funnily enough, whether you bought it last year in January or whether you're buying it right now, it looks like you would have paid the same price. Currently, the Giratina V is selling for $593 US, very expensive card, amazing Shinji Kanda artwork, super iconic. This card pretty much put Shinji Kanda on the map, and then when he recreated that same magic with Magikarp and everyone started loving the Magikarp, everyone was like, hey, Shinji Kanda, we're gonna now be following you as an artist. And of course now everyone just pretty much patiently waits for the next Shinji Kanda artworks. But as I said, it was selling for $593 in January. We go around here, it was selling for $615 at this time last year. If you waited a year, this is, you know how everyone says, oh, you gotta jump on it, man. If you're buying Pokemon cards, you need to act quickly. Sometimes you don't. And sometimes you do have to take that back seat, let things and watch from a distance. Because one thing with these new sets, everyone jumps in so quick. Just oh, a new set releases, I need to buy it now. Like, it's almost this, no one can kind of calm down from how hyped Pokemon cards are now, right now, because it's like, if you don't buy it straight away, you're gonna miss out. Sometimes with the singles, there is moments where they do drop, and so it's a big lesson, right? Because last year, $615, right now selling for $593. If you just saved throughout, if you wanted a chase card like this, which is super expensive, if you saved throughout the year, you could have bought it for the same price. And that is a very important lesson to learn when buying Pokemon cards. Don't just jump in thinking, hey, it's now or never. Same thing with the Gengar V from Fusion Strike. Pull this into the year graph, and same thing when we're looking at that from the year. Was selling for $697 last year. Right now selling for $730. So there's only around a $30 difference. But you can see the low in this for this Gengar was around $586 US. Though in the last 3 months, it's definitely had a different journey. Selling for $765 US and did drop down to $683. But you know, it's interesting to know everyone's thoughts. Do you think right now that these Sword and Shield cards are overpriced? It was funny because I saw on Reddit the other day, someone wrote, hey, I found my old collection, and they showed a Giratina V and a Gengar VMAX. What? Who is thinking that these are old? That like, some people do, right? I mean, it's 2021, these cards. We're in 2026 now, 5 years. I suppose they are getting a little bit older than a lot of people would like to admit. Now, Mega Gengar from Mega Dream EX, $584 on release, right now selling for $314. We are going to see Ascended Heroes and this Mega Gengar. It is going to be super interesting to see the prices for these. I think, just judging by how hyped Ascended Heroes is, I'm expecting pretty expensive prices for that Gengar. You know, Mega Gengar is such a sick Pokemon, dude. Like, the shiny version as well, it's a real standout Pokemon. Huge fan base. Gengar cards have a very long history in the TCG. We're going to have to see how this kind of plays out as well, but I do imagine the Ascended Heroes Gengar will be pretty expensive. And also, just to say, if you do love keeping up to date with Pokemon prices and everything that's covered, like what you're seeing in today's video, definitely feel free to subscribe to the channel. My name's Phil, and I've been making Pokemon content here for around 2 years now. There's been a really good community that's been built, and it's always amazing seeing new people on board the channel. And Blaziken VMAX as well, in the last 3 months, was selling for $379. Right now, selling for $343. Not many sales happening for this one in particular. In the year graph, we can get a better overview of this card. And the cheapest it was $322. Went up all the way to $389, and right now still selling for $345. So it's actually stayed more stable throughout the year, and it has a pretty stable price point around that $310 to $350 range. Whether or not it's going to be exceeding that in the future, it is likely that as the years go on, this will become a very more loved card, especially when people look back at Sword and Shield. Though you got to remember as well, all those kids that started in the Sword and Shield era, when they grow up, they're going to be very nostalgic for this generation. And same thing with Chilling Reign booster boxes, and that's where that Blaziken VMAX is actually from. It's from Chilling Reign. But look at this, man. Selling for $410 US, went all the way up to $576. And out of nowhere, this was such a bizarre thing that happened. Chilling Reign dropped down all the way to $413 for like a 5-year-old booster box just dropped out of nowhere, which was a big thing because sealed product without reprints very rarely dropped, but it's been climbing pretty steadily right now, selling for $500. So it was very short-lived. You look in the month, that's just been climbing the last month. The Chilling Reign, the price drop it had was very short-lived and people acted on it. Now looking at Lost Origin booster boxes, here's another interesting, selling for $805. Right now selling for $693. Maybe a little bit of an opportunity if it does follow the same path as Chilling Reign, though to be fair, I do think Lost Origin is a much better set than Chilling Reign, but of course, you know, maybe people will act on that, who knows. And even Moonbreon has been going through a bit of a price dip, selling for $2,285. Right now selling for $1,790. That is a huge price drop, man. Moonbreon has tanked a lot from its high point. Price points really struggle to maintain when they're that high. Though Evolving Skies booster boxes have also been dropping a little bit, selling for $2,580, and then it did drop to $2,187, and right now selling for $2,300, which again, like these prices are pretty much out of this world on how expensive an old Sword and Shield booster box can be. You know, we all knew that Evolving Skies was hyped, but did anyone think that it would really reach $2,300 in such a short amount of time? Really did prove to be an amazing investment. Though as much as all these things are changing for what's happening with alternate arts and Sword and Shield, it does bring up a lot of questions of what's going to be happening further in this year for Pokemon cards, because more and more people are now turning their eyes to Pokemon collectibles. And if you are interested in what's going to happen throughout this year, I do actually talk about that in this video here. Within this video on screen, I speak about what's going to be happening throughout 2026. If you enjoyed this video, click the video that's appearing on screen. Appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next video.